تفضل.
طيب the topic of my presentation or my speech is about changing the mindset. There is a paper, it's more detailed papers that will be hopefully later published. And the topic is actually probably closer to the question that's asked by Councillor Sani Lam. Do we have the right environment? So if I could try to make it a little bit lethal, and I say, do we have the right culture? If you look at the history of Sudan, the modern history of Sudan since 1956, since independence, we see that Sudan actually, and unfortunately, was going backwards, regardless of who was governing the Sudan, regardless of the nature of the ideology, whether right or left or center. At the moment, what we have is a shredded social fabric. We have a poor economy, we have a high level of lawlessness, and we have a fragmented political scene. And when we look at as I said earlier, that Sudan was governed by different ideologies, by different types of government, must be a common factor because we're going downwards. Yeah. So the main factor is actually is a cultural factor. That is the factor that we always tend to forget. We always think about political change, but we have tried this before and never worked. If we try to look at our culture, and this is a bit tough thing, because when we question our culture, it's like questioning our identity. This is a bit hard, but we have to go through it. I have here a list of few things that's characterize the negative side of our culture, the Sudanese culture. And first of it, it's actually impractical culture that values style over substance. And it values kin over competence. And by kin, I don't mean only just blood kin, that also mean ideological kin. And this, for example, we've seen it in the last 30 years. The other thing, this is probably more related to every citizen at the lower level also, is the utopian thinking. We have a utopian mentality, and which doesn't fit with the realities of our world. Also, we have emotional mindset, which doesn't fit with the required rationality to meet the challenges of this world. Another things also we have is a heavy politicization that we have, particularly in our institutions. This is actually increase the infighting inside all our institutions, particularly like universities. There is another thing about the way the citizens view their role. That's the heavy reliance on government. We think that everything should be done by the government, as if we citizens don't have any responsibilities. One factor, which I'll also mention it later, is the lack of business mentality. In Sudan, we have a bit negative attitudes towards anything related to profit, to business, and to the market. And I will go to this later in this talk. But how are we going to deal with these issues? First of all, we need to we have to go in a serious and honest debate and research on these issues, because these issues are impeding the development of Sudan. This is the people who could lead this debate or this discussion would be mainly social scientists, probably also economists and historians. This discussion and this research or this debate should follow a bottom-up approach. Why? Because governments cannot change people. It's people who can change themselves. And then we need to work at the bottom of the social pyramid, not from the top. And also, one of the important players could be non-governmental organizations, youth organizations, because we need to have access to the grassroots people. So this could be done through public lectures, public debates, probably talks at the universities, at schools, probably even visits to households. So it's sort of educating the public, informing the public about their roles, about the demands of development. Another section that we also need to incorporate is clerics in the mosques. Sudan is a Muslim majority country, and we know that in Muslim majority countries, the mosque is a very important institution, and we shouldn't overlook it. For doing formal work, probably it comes the role of education. Now, the schooling system in Sudan, particularly the primary and secondary level, there's need a big overhaul. The moment the schooling system favors mainly memorization and cramming of information. But what happens is, at least from my also experience, is that we cram information, we go to exam, and then we forget everything. We have a lot of information that we get in school, but we don't know what to do with it. Here I have a list of some of the things that really education system needs to promote in particularly school children, but later also for higher education. First, self-confidence and proactivity, curiosity and innovation, rationality and critical thinking, comprehension in addition to memorization, positive attitude to problems and failures, individuality and teamwork, that's one for all and all for one, communication skills, in addition, of course, to religious ethics that underlying the above. There's one thing here I like to add more to it, that's a positive attitude to problems and failures. That's changing problems into projects and viewing failures as lessons. And Soichiro Honda, the founder of the Honda Motor Company, once said that success is 99% failure. And he has really a very interesting story, and I recommend people to go in the internet and research the life of Soichiro Honda, because his life was full of challenges and failures. But he was very, very positive and managed to achieve the big company we know now, this Honda Motor Company. For higher education, one of the important things also is promoting this business mentality. We have an issue that probably one of the professors earlier mentioned is we have sort of divide between the market and the university. Usually our mentality in Sudan, we think that the market is for those people who fail to go to university. And as a result, we have sort of utopian universities that doesn't want to deal with the commercial, doesn't want to deal with the profit. And at the same time, we have market with mainly sort of uninformed market so that the people in the market also have a low value of themselves. And we need to bridge this gap between the educated people and between the market. So this is for me the end for these two formal points. I want to mention other 2 points regarding our view for development itself. The first point is our development and peace, the relationship between development and peace. Our usual mindset is usually that peace is a precondition for development, that without peace we cannot have development. There is a big problem here, is that no one can guarantee peace. And as long as you cannot guarantee peace, and if you tie development to peace, then you will never guarantee development and probably will never have it. The best approach to this is to use development as incentive for peace. And I can give a simple example. If you're going to a negotiation table, and if you have a development plan that's working, that's showing results, you have more probability to convince the other partner. But if you don't have, then why should they trust you? And we've tried this before. If you look in Sudan, we have peace negotiations since 1960s, and we're still having wars. We have never solved anything. So we never achieved peace and we never achieved development. The other thing, peace itself is a long-term process. So it's not about just signing agreements and divide the cabinets, but it's actually it's all about a development strategy. So peace should be tied, the process tied to a development strategy that's long-term. So when we have ceasefire, why we have only ceasefire? Why not we combine the ceasefire with infrastructure project? If there is ceasefire in South Kordofan, why not it's tied to a project, let's say for a railway line between Kadugli and Kauda? Just an example, it might be a simple example, but just to illustrate my idea. Another point, this is the second point regarding our understanding of development, is development and security. Usually our mindset is that defense and security are sort of antithesis of development. But if you have development and you want to make sure this development is sustainable, you need to protect it. And if you need to protect it, you need to invest in defense and security and anything related to it, like defense industry. So we should view defense and security as part of the sustainable development process. This is something you cannot escape. And as I said earlier, we cannot guarantee peace. We cannot guarantee security. So as long as you cannot guarantee this, particularly in the Sahel and Sahara region, which is very unstable, then we have to incorporate this in our mindset towards development. So there are many other points, but I will leave it for probably the discussion if people want to ask questions. Please feel free to ask in Arabic or in English. I will try to answer. So I stop here. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you very much, Dr. Osman, for an interesting perspective on your thoughts about development, especially on the issues of the social behavioral issues on Sudan. I think the presentation touched on several issues, including how we as Sudanese people view development. He started off by looking at our perspective on Ken versus competence. He also looked at the business mentality that we hold in Sudan. He then touched upon the whole idea of how we could change this using a bottom-up approach, other than versus a top-to-bottom approach, and by pointing out that we could do lectures to raise awareness for people, and using the sort of the religious side also with Imam, increasing awareness for people in mosques. Then he touched upon the school and how we do sort of what he mentioned is called rote learning, which is memorizing, and we have a lot of information, and that has that information is not then sort of galvanized to lead into something that could be done online, because it's much more of information than just knowledge, so that so we need to distinguish between just information and the student being able to observe the knowledge and do something about it. So this is totally different. Many people could memorize information, they could just plop it out, but the knowledge of how it goes into his mental status and how it changed him and how he could then bring about creating value from it, that's totally different game. So this was an interesting aspect he mentioned. Then he talked about the success and failure, that we have a lot of failure in these areas. And then he mentioned development, he talked about the whole idea of putting peace first or development first. So I think the floor is open for question. In my humble opinion, for Dr. Osman, I strongly believe that there was, in the beginning of the presentation, a very gloomy view of how Sudan was for the past 60 years, ever since independence. I really would like to not look at it that way. It's just from a simple perspective that we had one of the strongest economy in Africa. We had the Sudanese pound that is equal to almost $3, and we had a strong industrial sector. Dr. Ali could explain to it, from tannery to all of the other fields of production of food, to fabrics, to welding and other stuff. So I would like to stress out that we had a good economy, we had good industrialization in Sudan. The question that should be more looked into is what caused all of this to be destroyed, I should say, or to be degraded. We already know that we had a system that had its sole intention to destroy these industrial hubs. And even Dr. Osman mentioned that development should also be spread throughout the country. We could also look at that this existed in Sudan. We had food factories that were canned food factories that were outside the capital. We had milk factories like in Baba Nusa, which is outside the capital. So what I'm trying to say is that let's not look at Sudan from a gloomy perspective and say, okay, ever since independence, we were in great chaos. We graduated leaders that went abroad and led their own field all across the world. This was the production of the same educational system that we are criticizing now, although this is not the same one that produces them a long time ago doing independence and after independence, because we had the systematic destruction of the quality of education with many universities being being registered without showing their quality. This was mentioned in the beginning of the day. With this in mind, I look forward to seeing any question, but I hope that we do not look at Sudan history ever since independence gloomy, because I see great talent that graduated, and one of them is with us here, Dr. Adil, who could explain to you how industrialization in Sudan was and how it became degraded up to now. So if there's any question, I would be happy for people to ask Dr. Osman. Great. If you have any comments to point out, Dr. Osman, please feel free to share.
Yeah, okay, I could just make a short comment. For example, I know that in Sudan, we like to take pride that in 1970s, one Sudanese pound was equivalent to $3. But at that time, United States was going to the moon. We were not. Yeah, there was United States was industrial country, and we were not. So it's not about how much.
But that's a relative comparison. UK was not going to the moon at that time.
Yes, exactly.
Korea, which is a country that I studied in all of my life, did not have industrialization in the 1970s as Sudan had, and they could even admit so.
Yes, exactly. That's true. But Korea was going upwards or going downwards. I don't mean this to make people upset or to make it like gloomy, but it's just for us. We need to be a bit honest in order to solve our problems. It's going to be hard, but this is at least not for us. It's also for our children. We need to look at the root causes of our problem. Yeah,
I totally agree with looking at the current status quo and how we are now at a very bad threshold in Sudan history. This is totally true, and we should look at it in a very pragmatic way. What we are seeing in Sudan is a total destruction, and this is true. We're not saying this is not happening in Sudan. Hopefully, what we're trying to say is that there is a glimpse of hope that we could learn from the past and build for the future. Dr. Adil has a quick comment to point out. I hope he unmute his mic to share some of his thoughts. Yes, and we have very short time. So Dr. Adil, I would take your time, but
Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you very much for this. Actually, this is a very interesting thing because I think I agree with both of you. I think Dr. Tangasawi is trying, to average the 65 years, and of course, the outcome of that averaging is that we are going down. Whereas you are looking at pockets, which I agree with you totally. At some stage during the last 65 years, particularly in the industrial field, we were doing very well. However, we have gone now down again. So, but the thing which I agree more with Dr. Tangasawi is that the general mindset of the Sudanese people didn't have the time to change enough. So we have actually inherited a mindset for a very long time, which is not quite positive about changing. And it is resisting change now for us. And that will take time to happen. But we should not really look at the picture, from just one side and say it is as gloomy as he put it for the whole 65 years. But there was a lot of fighting during the last 65 years, which let the Sudan go up and down in different directions. And actually, in my presentation, if you are staying, around in the next session, I'll show you, those pockets where the industrial sector in Sudan was doing very well, even during the 2000s. But unfortunately, these things happen. But generally speaking, averaging over the 65 years, we are not succeeding. Thank you.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. If you have anything to add, Dr. Osman, before we proceed to the next session.
Okay, you can proceed, please. Thanks.
Dr. Saleh would like to, he's raising his hand. I'm not sure if he wants a question. Okay, so he wants a question. Yeah. Okay, the time. Okay. So thank you very much, Dr. Osman. We look forward to talking later on.
بنحلم بفضاء أوسع بنحلم بزمن أجمل بلاد ميلاد بلاد ميلاد بنحلم بفضاء أوسع بنحلم بزمن أجمل بلاد ممتد لحد حدود الحد وطن لا فيه هم لا غم فقط نسعى